Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. China and Kazakhstan agree to strengthen their relationship as President Xi Jinping is welcomed in Astana before a major summit.
Our other headlines: United States jobless claims rise and fewer new openings than expected last month. We're in New York.
Last-minute campaigning by political parties in the UK before Thursday's general election. We hear why migration is top of many voters' concerns.
And brace for Beryl. A deadly hurricane heads towards Jamaica, leaving a trail of destruction right across the Caribbean.
China's President Xi Jinping has been welcomed in Astana before a leaders' summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in Kazakhstan.
Russia's Vladimir Putin is also attending, along with leaders from Central Asia, Iran, India and Pakistan. Turkey's President Erdogan is attending as a guest. The SCO is a political, economic and security grouping established by China and Russia in 2001. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Alyosha Malenkovich, who's watching events for us in Astana. Alyosha, tell us about President Xi's agenda.
It was a very busy day for Chinese President Xi Jinping here in Astana. Started early in the morning with high-profile meeting with his Kazakhstan counterpart, with his Kazakhstan host, President Tokayev. Both sides, both China and Kazakhstan, showed that this visit, that this meeting was of a high importance for both sides. Several very important contracts or agreements were signed. The two leaders also discussed about opening of new transportation routes, about increasing cross-border trade, and of course increasing also trade in international currencies. And both leaders attended opening or gave a green light for opening of Trans-Caspian corridor. This is a new transportation route that will connect China with the rest of the Europe. Let's not forget that 80% of all Chinese goods that it is sent to Europe is actually traveling through Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan is very much interested in expanding its infrastructure or transport capabilities with the help of China, and China also is interested in increasing the throughput of all those transportation corridors through Kazakhstan. And that was one of the most important elements of today's meeting. But of course, Chinese president met other presidents here as well. As you mentioned, he met Russian President Vladimir Putin and also presidents of Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan and Azerbaijan.
The full SCO meeting takes place tomorrow. What can we expect?
The key word for this 24th summit of SCO countries is expansion, enlargement. Those words are going to label this entire meeting, which will happen in Astana on Thursday. 17 delegations are here from 17 countries. Most of them are led by presidents of their countries or the prime ministers. 10 member states. One of those 10 member states is first time here at the SCO summit as a full member. That's Belarus. Seven more countries are interested in either becoming a part of the SCO or to become just observer countries, observer nations. And this is happening. According to what we learn tomorrow, there will be more discussions about increasing security in this region, because all these countries here would like to see stable environment, stable and peaceful environment, because that's a most important thing for better economies. And this is something that all of these countries are very much interested in.
Alyosha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Alyosha Malenkovich in Astana.
Kazakhstan's Minister for Industry and Construction says trade is at the centre of the SCO gatherings.
I think SCO is a great platform for everybody, and to us, importantly, it is to develop cooperation between our countries. I think that's one part of what is particularly good to be hosting such an event, and the other part is, which is obviously a lot more relevant for somebody who is in charge of industry and construction is there's a lot of business meetings taking place right now. I think to us, having this platform to cooperate both at political and a business level has tremendous advantage for Kazakhstan. And I think Kazakhstan is from the location standpoint, is also a perfect location because it is in the center of Eurasia. It's been part of the Belt and Road initiatives for many years now. China is a big investor in our manufacturing industry, or at least in many ways a great collaborator. So we collaborate very well with the industrial companies in China. I'll give you one example. Right now, as we speak, we're building a facility in Almaty, a car factory, 90,000 units per year. And this factory will be producing Chinese car brands. And that we expect to launch this in the first half of 2025.
Well, we've just heard about the importance of trade routes between China and Europe, the Trans-Caspian, also known as the Middle Corridor. Our correspondent Chen Tong reports.
We visited the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route Association in Astana.
Nice to meet you too. Welcome to our office. Please.
Gaidar Ardakamov recently returned from China, where he was promoting the Middle Corridor to local clients. The transport route begins in China's Lianyungang port, passing through Central Asia, the Caspian Sea, and onto Europe and Africa. It's the shortest trade route between China and Europe.
The Middle Corridor is especially unique due to its multimodality. We can deliver cargo in 14 to 18 days from China to the borders of Europe, and this is our main advantage.
In 2023, 2.8 million tons of cargo traveled across the Middle Corridor, a year increase of 64%. 11 nations are members of the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route Association, but the Secretary General says new applications are being received. He says more infrastructure will be built in the future to help facilitate trade.
Step by step, we are expanding our capacity, and our expectations are very big because the geopolitical situation is changing constantly, and the route must work regardless of these circumstances.
With more transportation methods being offered and more countries joining the organization, the Middle Corridor will only make it easier and faster for China to ship cargo to Europe via Kazakhstan. And more importantly, this Middle Corridor will only provide more business opportunities along the route, boosting trade among Asia, Africa, and Europe. Chen Tong, CGTN, Astana, Kazakhstan.
Growth in China's services sector slowed in June to its lowest level in 8 months. Confidence also hit a 4-year low, hit by a slowdown in new orders. The Purchasing Managers Index dropped from 54 to 51.2, reigniting calls for more policy support from Beijing. Any figure above 50 indicates growth, below 50 signals contraction.
Boeing's $4.7 billion takeover of its former supplier, Spirit AeroSystems, has raised job fears in Northern Ireland. The US plane maker's trying to regain control of parts of its supply chain after safety failures on its 737 MAX jets. But new ownership could mean a mass layoff at Spirit's 6 Belfast plants. It's the region's biggest manufacturer and employs 3,500 workers.
While many governments around the world are looking to slash working hours to try to boost productivity, one European country has gone the other way. Greece has announced a 6-day working week, hoping to turbocharge their economy. The measure is designed to combat a shrinking population and shortage of workers. Unions have called it barbaric.
France votes for a second time on Sunday, with Marine Le Pen's far-right party aiming to win a parliamentary majority.
Over 200 candidates from the political left and centre-left are trying to work together in a bid to block Le Pen's party after they made historic gains to win the first round. Nabila Ramdani is a journalist and the author of Fixing France: How to Repair a Broken Republic.
The idea is to try and block out, effectively, the far-right National Rally from winning an absolute majority of seats at the 577th National Assembly in Paris, and thus potentially enable them to form a government with 28-year-old Jordan Bardella as prime minister, someone, it has to be said, who has zero experience of government, but plenty of extremist and social economic views. And this tactical arrangement was all, or consideration was all about who would step down in key constituencies with a single candidate will be kept in place, somebody who will be better placed to try and defeat the National Rally in the final round of the election on Sunday. So there were potentially more than 2 candidates in more than 300 out of the 577 constituencies, but if they all stood, that would split the anti-far-right vote. So if there's only one anti-National Rally candidate up against a National Rally candidate, then the anti-National Rally candidate has a much better chance of winning. And this is called the Republican Front, one with a sole purpose to lock out the far right.
Will this really dent the advance of the far-right National Rally? And has anything like this happened before?
Yes, I think certainly it is a perfectly ethical and indeed legal move. Democratic politics is all about building support for a cause, and in this case, opponents of the far right view blocking them as being the most important thing, more important than anything else, even putting, infighting aside. The compromise may be that they are working with the ideological enemies, but politics is all about compromise in the end, but that would mean a proposal that would guarantee chaos. Yes, the Republican Front has been deployed frequently, as far back as 2002, when Jean-Marie Le Pen came second in the race to become president of France. He did well in the first round, but then his vote fell apart in the second round, thanks to the Republican Front.
President Macron gambles calling this surprise snap election. Does it look like it's been a good idea? Do you think it's paid off?
I think if we consider that his cause is the cause of Emmanuel Macron, then he has certainly damaged it because he will now potentially be thought of as the man who let the far right in power. He could easily have done nothing, kept them out of power, and continued in power himself until 2027. That said, by that time, the danger posed by the far right would simply have been allowed to fester, if you like, and could have become immeasurably more sinister. So at least the country now has a chance to face it head on without the immediate change or the immediate danger, if you like, of a far-right president.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Jobless claims rise and fewer new openings than expected last month. We're in New York next.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. There's evidence the jobs market is slowing down in the United States. Claims for unemployment benefit rose for the 9th week in a row.
Two reports suggest that employers' demand is falling off for new workers. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Karina Mitchell, who's in New York. So, Karina, headline number showing private growth slowed. But what does this say about what the Federal Reserve might do to interest rates?
Yeah, absolutely, Jamie and Robin. Good to be with you. So a lot to parse through in those ADP numbers. The headline number coming in at 150,000. The estimate was for 160,000. Now, most of those job gains came in the leisure and hospitality space, where 63,000 jobs were added. Without that, June hiring in the private sector would have been quite anemic. So there are analysts that now think that we are at this inflection point when it comes to labor, and the Fed needs to act very carefully, tread carefully about what its next steps are so that it doesn't tip us into some sort of recession. Now, I want to take a little bit closer look at this report and talk about wages, because some interesting numbers. For people who are in the same job, their wages increased on average by 4.9% at an annual rate. That's the slowest pace since August of 2021. Now, if you switch jobs, that number came in at 7.7%, also markedly lower. So no red flags as per se in this particular report, but it is the big precursor to the June non-farm payrolls report that comes out on Friday. Remember, we have an abbreviated session today, closing in just under an hour, and then close for the 4th of July. But in that Friday jobs report, we're expecting to see hiring come in at about 190,000. We'll have to wait to see what happens to unemployment there. But if that report underperforms, it will light a fire under this Federal Reserve to perhaps be more aggressive about rate cuts. Remember, right now, markets pricing in that there's a 70% chance we see that first rate cut in September. Jamie, Robin.
Karina, I want to move away from economic news to talk about company news. Tesla, which has seen its stock soaring after delivery figures that came out on Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly. A huge beat there on deliveries for the second quarter, coming in at 444,000. Compare that to the first quarter, where they saw deliveries drop by 8.5%. That's quite a turnaround. So that sent this stock soaring by up to 10% by the end of the close yesterday. I just checked a few minutes ago. It's up another 6% in today's session. So really getting off to a good start for the second half of the year. For the first half, they were down by 16.5%. They've recovered that in just over the last 24 hours. And get this, over the past month, the stock is up 39%. So now the big next test for them is to talk about their gross margins to help gauge how much profit they are making on each of these cars. They're set to report earnings towards the end of July. But EVs are really on a roll at the moment. We saw some of Chinese competitors for Tesla like NIO and Zeekr reported record deliveries back in June. And right here in the U.S., General Motors also said their EV sales are up a whopping 40% in the latest quarter. So definitely seeing some momentum there. But let me end with this. Whether you're driving or you're flying, we are expecting record travel this 4th of July holiday.
Karina, thank you very much. Our correspondent, Karina Mitchell in New York.
There are now less than 48 hours to go until the polls open in the UK general election. Our correspondents have been visiting different parts of the country to try to gauge what's on voters' minds. Jen Copestake has been to the port of Dover in the southeast of England. For voters there, this election is dominated by one issue: migration.
The port of Dover, with its iconic white cliffs, is one of the busiest ferry ports in the world. France is just 34 kilometers away across the English Channel. But it's not just ferry and freight traffic arriving here. It is a central point where small boats carrying migrants arrive in the UK.
Over 13,000 people have crossed the Channel so far this year, according to data from the UK Home Office. 120,000 people have made the journey to the UK on this route since 2018.
We were told we would be able to see for ourselves the scale of boats crossing by following a path through a nearby forest.
So this is where we were told to come to see the boats that are confiscated by UK customs. And certainly we can see boats here. There's dozens of boats and parts of boats, some with French language written across the hull, and even one with an Italian flag. We asked the UK Home Office for comment on these boats, but they told us they do not provide commentary on operational procedures. Plans on preventing migrants using the channel have been all over the news. Here in Dover, where the issue is most visible, opinions are divided.
If we want to come to this country, come in the proper way. If you've got a proper excuse to enter this country, yeah, I ain't got a problem with that. If you're willing to come in, take up the English way of life, crack on.
Living in this community, we've seen the impact of the children that come across. I'm in education, I'm a teacher, so we see these children that aren't being necessarily supported once they get here, the dangerous crossings they're coming on, that has to be part of what I'm thinking about when I'm doing my voting.
I'm a Palestinian guy, initially from Israel. Some people are worried about who they are, where they come from. I don't believe we have any obligation to accommodate these people, and they must return to France.
Me personally, I want to get up and get out of this country. That's what I want to do.
What's stopping you from leaving?
Well, I will do. I will be doing. When I'm at the right point in my life and I've got enough money behind me, I will be, yeah.
What kind of country are you looking at going to?
Probably Spain or somewhere, yeah.
Aram Rauf knows the dangers asylum seekers face when coming to the UK. Arriving after a 7-day journey from Turkey in the back of a truck 25 years ago, Aram was fleeing torture in Iraq as a 17-year-old.
Most of the major political party, they manage to get the poorer people against poorer people. 14 years of the Tory government and all crisis of international market, the COVID, the Brexit. Put all these in aside, people will blame everything on a migrant and they will forget about all that stuff.
Abaida Shakira arrived from Syria through a UN refugee relocation program and now works with the Kent Refugee Action Network.
The refugees is known here as an issue in the UK, but if you compare the UK to other countries, there are only like 1% of refugees in the UK, but the media make it like such an issue here. There are like plenty of issues like in the UK, but mainly they don't focus on it. Mainly they focus on refugees.
Whether it's rightly in the spotlight or taking the focus from more critical issues, on Election Day the issue of small boats crossing here will be in the forefront of many voters' minds. Jen Copestick, CGTN, Dover.
UK opinion polls have consistently predicted the same outcome since the vote was called in May. A humiliating defeat for the ruling Conservatives and a return to power for Labour after 14 years. Our correspondent Michael Voss reports.
Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has been touring the country, putting on a brave face. But his message, don't give Labour a supermajority, is an admission that the Conservative Party could face its worst election losses in decades. At a rally in London on Tuesday night, Sunak urged supporters not to give up hope.
I say to every Conservative, don't surrender to Labour, fight for every vote, fight for our values.
Rishi Sunak is the 5th Conservative Party leader in 14 years. Boris Johnson won a huge majority at the last election, but his scandal-ridden administration saw him resign, followed by Liz Truss, whose unfunded budget spooked the financial markets.
If there's one defining legacy of the past 14 years, it's Brexit. It remains a highly divisive issue, but one that didn't feature prominently in this election. Instead, it's the deteriorating state of the National Health Service and the cost of living crisis.
The frontrunner is Labour's Keir Starmer, who was out campaigning in Wales on Wednesday morning, repeating his core message, it's time for change.
We have to say over and over again, change only happens if you vote for it. Change only happens if you vote for it.
In the 2019 election, Labour suffered a humiliating defeat under the hard-left leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, who's since been dropped from the party. The leader of the Liberal Democrats has spent the entire campaign performing stunts to gain media attention. He spent Wednesday morning campaigning in Conservative heartlands in the south of England, where the party hopes disillusioned Conservatives will turn to them rather than Labour, making them the country's third largest party. One unknown is how Nigel Farage's populist anti-immigration Reform Party will fare. The Conservative Party has failed to stem the flow of illegal migrants crossing the Channel from France. Reform may not win many seats, but is likely to take votes away from the Conservatives. The polls close at 10 p.m. local time on Thursday. Britain's future will become clearer shortly after. Michael Voss, CGTN, London.
Bolivians are getting back to normality after a failed coup attempt.
For many, that means economic hardship and a dependence on, and now shortage of, US dollars. Our correspondent Dan Collins reports.
Bolivia's so-called economic miracle early this century appears a distant memory. The boom in natural gas production and exports is now in the past. Despite a faster-than-expected economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and low inflation, many Bolivians say they're struggling day to day to make ends meet. As the economy sags, Bolivians are feeling the pinch. So many more are coming to wholesale markets like this one in La Paz to buy national produce at a lower cost. People are not buying like before. Edna Acebe and her husband run their household on a tight budget. Their business, selling industrial security products, is just scraping by, she says.
We can't import products because there is no money. What we have in the store is what we sell, a little, but then everything else is paralyzed. We are in a daily struggle just to survive.
The economic crisis is in part due to a heavy dependence on the dollar, which is draining international reserves, as well as mounting debt and the failure to produce natural gas, once the mainstay of the Andean country's economy. The lack of dollars has pushed up the price of imports, most of all its fuel, both diesel and gasoline, meaning long queues.
We have problems purchasing hydrocarbons, and this is affecting the productive apparatus and has become a kind of a threat to the different sectors, that in the face of this shortage of foreign currency and fuel, they feel the inflation of prices in their daily lives, given that most of our products are imported.
Last week's apparent failed coup brought out supporters of Arce, who has struggled with low approval. The president, who served as finance minister under longtime former leader Evo Morales, insists that the economy is growing and therefore not in crisis. He told CGTN that Bolivia is betting on its vast lithium reserves with Chinese help.
We have 3 companies working with us for the Bolivian lithium industrialization, and Chinese, of course, it's a good partner for us for improving not only trade but also investment, and also many things that can help us to, to overcome the problems we are facing now.
But critics say industrialization of the mineral that is key for electric car batteries will take time. Meanwhile, inflation has outpaced economic growth, and most Bolivians are struggling with low pay and unstable working conditions. Dan Collins, CGTN, La Paz.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, another violent attack in Israel, this time at a shopping mall. The police say it was terror-related.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. The headlines again. China and Kazakhstan agree to strengthen their relationship as President Xi Jinping is welcomed in Astana before a major summit.
Part of the headlines, United States jobless claims rise and there are fewer new openings than expected last month.
And last-minute campaigning by political parties in the UK before Thursday's general election.
There's been another violent attack in Israel, this time at a shopping mall.
An Israeli soldier was killed and another injured in what police describe as a terror incident. The attacker was shot dead. Let's talk to our correspondent, Jonathan Regev, who's in Tel Aviv. Jonathan, what else can you tell us about that? I think, unfortunately, we aren't able to talk to Jonathan Regev right now. We can't hear him. Hopefully, we will go back to him later in the programme.
Well, let's see if we can bring you the picture from Gaza with our correspondent, Akram Al-Satiri.
Yes, Palestinians have been asked by the Israeli occupation forces to leave an area that is equal to around two-thirds of Khan Yunis area, which is the entire east of Khan Yunis area, starting from the very northern part of Khan Yunis next to Rafah to the very southern part of Khan Yunis next to central Gaza, central Gaza. According to the estimates of some of the UNRWA experts, around 250,000 Palestinians had to move abruptly because of the very short notice they were given. And today also some people in Al-Manara neighborhood in one of the areas in the east of Khan Yunis were asked to move, which left the Palestinians in a status of panic, and some of them were sleeping the nights in the street and were frantically trying to find someone that would host them, because they didn't have any other option but rather to try to find people to host them. They have been trying, they have been affected, they have been displaced, and some of the people that I talked to are displaced once again for the 13th time now, which gives you an indication of the suffering, of the pain, of the exhaustion that they have been experiencing because of that recurrent displacement that they have been seeing. Also in the northern Gaza and in Al-Shajaiya neighborhood, around 65,000 Palestinians were asked to leave their homes. Some of them headed south to Khan Yunis, to Gaza central area, and even, but not to Rafah because of the ongoing fighting in that area. And they were asked also, they didn't have any other option but to stay in the streets and to try to find anyone who would accept to host them for 1 or 2 days till they find another area or another tent or another shelter that can accommodate them. So the continuous displacement is still taking place, and the Israeli continuous ground operation is aggravating the situation and leaving the Palestinians more vulnerable and more in need to protection and accommodation.
Let's go back now to Tel Aviv and talk to our correspondent there, Jonathan Regev. So, Jonathan, one Israeli soldier killed and another injured in what police are describing as a terror incident. What can you tell us about it?
Yes, and what is rather unusual in this attack is the fact that it was carried out by an Israeli Arab citizen. We've seen many attacks of this kind, unfortunately, but usually they're carried out by Palestinians who cross from the West Bank and into Israel and carry out these stabbing attacks. This time we're speaking of an Israeli Arab citizen. Of course, Israeli Arab citizens have every right that has every other Israeli citizen as far as movement around the country, and the fact that basically we're speaking of one Israeli citizen killing another one. This is what is unusual in this attack. We have to say that the vast majority of the Israeli Arab community, which is quite substantial, some 20% of the population or so, are completely distancing themselves from similar attacks, and also completely distancing themselves from sympathizing with Hamas in the current war that is going on in Gaza. But there are certain sporadic incidents like the one we saw earlier today in northern Israel, and the result, as you mentioned, one Israeli soldier was stabbed to death, another one was seriously injured in an attack that, once again, we say is unusual in the fact that it was carried out by another Israeli citizen, an Israeli Arab citizen.
And Jonathan, the United States and France hoping to calm the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah, but things on the ground seem to suggest that that will be rather difficult.
Yes, absolutely. And the United States and France have all the good intentions. The United States, of course, Israel's closest ally, and France is the closest ally that Lebanon has in the Western world. But on the ground, nothing seems to indicate anything slowing down in this conflict. Quite the contrary. Earlier today, Israel killed a senior Hezbollah official in southern Lebanon. And as expected, the retaliation from Hezbollah shortly after that already arrived in the form of some 100 rockets that were fired to northern Israel, to areas in northern Israel. Is that the end of it? Not so sure. This might be quite a loud night, quite a violent night along the border. And I say again, the United States and France, they really have their best intention. We saw a French foreign minister a couple of times in the region. We saw the U.S. envoy, Amos Hochstein, coming to Jerusalem, to Beirut, speaking with officials. But on the ground, this war has been going on for 9 months on that border. Yes, with certain rules of engagement, both sides clearly not exercising all of the power that they have, but nothing seems to be indicating that the war that is already going on that border is about to end.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Our correspondent, Jonathan Regev, in Tel Aviv.
More than 120 people are now known to have died in a stampede at a Hindu prayer meeting in India, nearly all of them women.
Around 250,000 people attended the event, which was only designed to hold 80,000. Our correspondent, Ravinder Bauer, reports.
A religious congregation has turned into a massive tragedy on Tuesday, where over 100 people have lost their lives and thousands have been injured, and it was unfolded at this spot, which you can see, which was full of all these devotees who had gathered here for the sermon of their religious leader, and little did they know that this will be the last day of their lives. As you can see, tents were put up in this area, and it is when the leader was about to leave that some devotees tried to get closer to him, and that led to the stampede. No exit routes or emergency services were placed here. No entry points were marked, no exit points were marked, and emergency vehicles or ambulances or medics were kept at standby because the health department wasn't informed about it. It happened because this whole area, as you can see, is not leveled properly, and people fell over each other, and that's how some of them lost their lives due to suffocation. This is the primary healthcare center, which is not very far from the spot where the incident happened. First, 3 dead bodies of the children were brought in here, which surprised the hospital administration, and they reached out to the police to find out that more dead bodies are on their way. This put pressure on the hospital administration because they had never handled a situation like this. Let's find out from the patients here as to what really happened on the spot.
I fell down, and after that I don't remember anything. I don't know how I fell, and many people fell on top of me, and I was buried below them.
I fell in a big hole, and the ones behind me didn't know what was happening up front. They walked towards the road where the hole was and fell over other people. The ones below them all died.
From the primary healthcare center, the bodies are being brought to the district hospital, where after post-mortem they will be handed over to the loved ones. Investigations have been ordered and a judicial inquiry has been initiated, and it is important for these families to know who is responsible for this incident. Ravinder Baba, CGTN, Hathras.
One of the most powerful hurricanes ever to hit the Caribbean is now heading towards Jamaica. Hurricane Beryl is expected to make landfall in the capital, Kingston. It's already left a trail of destruction in Grenada, Venezuela and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, killing at least 7 people. Jamaica's Prime Minister is calling on people to stock up on essentials. Well, let's talk to Kalisha Williams, who's in St. Elizabeth Parish in Jamaica. Kalisha, welcome. Good to see you. How are people dealing with this? How are people feeling, do you think?
Thank you for joining me. Yes, I'm in St. Elizabeth, which is one of the parishes or sections of the island which will face the brunt of the storm. And people here, they're pretty, I would say, anxious, concerned, worried. What we're seeing now, it's pretty calm, light wind. We had a little rain just a few minutes ago, but some are saying it's a proverbial storm, calm before the storm. So what they're hoping for is that the system will just get a little rain. They're hoping that the eye of the storm will pass and not cause any major damage. But I must say that this section of the island is like the farming and fishing belt. You have over 30,000 farmers here. So you just imagine the devastation that this would cause to the island's economy, especially the island's agricultural industry, should Hurricane Beryl cause severe damage to the southern sections of the island. So there's anxiety, tension. For the most part, people have heeded the warnings issued by the Prime Minister earlier this morning. There's an island-wide curfew. So from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. is a no movement for the entire country. And I'm just here now near to the coast. The sea was pretty calm, and yeah, we're just waiting to see what will happen in the next few hours. I understand that the situation may change.
Kalisha, we've just been watching pictures of folks refueling and stockpiling shopping. You've given us the picture in Jamaica. I mean, just give us a steer on how the rest of the Caribbean has fared as Hurricane Beryl has moved.
Yes, it was pretty devastating, especially in Grenada for the small isle Carriacou. I'm understanding over 7 people have died, since Hurricane Beryl left the Eastern Caribbean and moved towards the Windward Island. So now they're in recovery mode, but it's just widespread devastation. In one section of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I understand it was almost 90% destruction of the houses there. So it's just a severe blow, a trail of destruction caused by Hurricane Beryl. And at the time, it was the category 3, category 4. So Jamaicans now are just really concerned, having seen what happened in the Eastern Caribbean. Yeah.
Many of these communities are poor, aren't they? How will they recover from an event like this?
It will take some time. And just going back to the Eastern Caribbean, speaking specifically to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, just a few years ago, they were still recovering from that widespread destructive volcanic eruption. So these areas are prone to natural disasters, tropical storms, the heat wave, still, recovering from those events. So it will take some time, and these communities are heavily dependent, as I mentioned earlier, on agriculture, on fishing, on tourism. Just coming from the coast earlier and seeing the fishermen, and for them, they're just trying to secure their vessels, and they're hoping that, it will not be as bad this time around, but it will put a severe blow on their earnings, because it's what they do for a living. This is their livelihood. And a lot of them, they still have their pots out at sea, so they're looking that it's already a lot based on the projections for Hurricane Beryl.
Kalisha, look after yourself. Good to talk to you. Kalisha Williams talking to us there from Jamaica.
Thank you so much.
Around 13,000 people have been moved from their homes in California as wildfires take hold. The worst of the blazes have been around the city of Oroville near Sacramento, where power lines and water supplies are at risk. Much of California remains on alert for further wildfires amid a record-breaking heat wave.
At least 34 people have been killed by flooding in the Indian state of Assam. Around 600,000 people are said to have been affected, with many people sheltering in relief camps. The heavy rain is forecast to continue until Friday.
Japan's top court has ruled a law that saw thousands of disabled people forcibly sterilised between the 1950s and the 1990s to be unconstitutional. It also decided that victims would be compensated. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida apologised to the victims and plans to apologise in person this month.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, Degrees of Friendship, the new campus of a university in Astana, helping to bring China and Kazakhstan closer.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe. Back to our top story and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit and the relationship between China and Kazakhstan. 40 years ago, Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev studied Chinese at the Beijing Language and Culture University.
Now that same university has opened a new campus in Astana. Our correspondent Chen Tong reports.
Beijing Language and Culture University's new Kazakhstan campus is in the World Expo area of Astana. It's a joint project with Astana International University. On the new campus, I met with the principal, who showed me the registration card of President Tokayev. He stayed here for 10 months.
Yeah, 1 year. Yeah.
1 year. Yeah. Between September 1983 and June 1984. President Tokayev studied Chinese at the Beijing Language and Culture University. He's discussed his learning experience on many occasions over the years, and he visited his alma mater last year. The connection between the Kazakh leader and the new campus lends the new project a highly personal and unique edge.
40 years ago, President Tokayev studied at this university, and that gives us an impulse. We regard it as a sign that the work put into this branch will turn into a success, and the bridge of friendship between our countries and students will form a strong basis for the development of good neighborly and friendly relations.
The university will start to enroll students in August, a month ahead of the school officially opening in September. It plans to enroll students not only from Kazakhstan, but also countries from other nations in Central Asia who want to study the Chinese language.
As an example, Chinese businessmen implemented more than 50 investment projects. But when we discussed the problems they faced, they always said it was very difficult to find well-qualified personnel with knowledge of the Chinese language to help them during the process. By opening the Beijing Language and Culture University branch, we are trying to close this gap.
An estimated of 28,000 students from Central Asia are studying in China, 14,000 of them from Kazakhstan alone. And now with projects like this one being developed, more students from Central Asia will have opportunities to study at the Chinese universities. Chen Tong, CGTN, Astana, Kazakhstan.
Agriculture is the backbone of Tajikistan's economy, with its fertile land producing fruit.
Our correspondent Yang Chengxi has been to a market to learn about the growing export trade to China.
Look at these pyramids of melons. These were actually birthday gifts from the president of Tajikistan, Emomali Rahmon, to Vladimir Putin. It's no surprise if you know that melons are a symbol of this Central Asian country. Agriculture is the cornerstone of Tajikistan's economy, and the majority of farmers grow fruit. That's why this bazaar in the capital of Dushanbe is so full of colors. In fact, the name Dushanbe means Monday, because a weekly market was held here every Monday when the city first started as a small village. Now brace for a montage of me making weird noises as I explore this market.
Wow. I have never seen pears this small. Interesting.
These cherries are particularly delicious thanks to the region's unique climate.
Why are Tajik cherries so delicious? He insisted I taste it first.
Our clean air in Hassa makes the fruits naturally sweet and healthy. There are many buyers and importers from foreign countries who are interested.
Among the biggest export markets for them are Russia and China. In the first half of this year, over 3,200 kilograms of Tajik cherries were flown into China from this airport alone. Within 24 hours of being picked, these cherries are ready to be served on consumers' tables in their export markets.
Wow.
Sorry for that noise. Yang Chengxi, CGTN, Dushanbe, Tajikistan.
Rising sea levels due to climate change are causing increased salt levels in rivers and groundwater that would normally be used to irrigate crops.
It's known as saltwater intrusion, and it's prompted one company to help affected communities by reintroducing crops which can tolerate salt. Our correspondent Amelia Hemphill reports from Spain.
Climate change has disrupted water systems around the world. As sea levels rise and rain patterns shift, coastal soils are becoming saltier. This salinization is a serious problem, threatening soil fertility and our global food security. On the banks of the mighty Guadalquivir River, Yannick Nyberg, founder of Nara Climate, is working on the front line of climate change.
Yannick, what's the projection if climate change keeps going as it is? How will that affect agriculture here?
Well, we already know that a third of the farmland globally is threatened by salt and salinity. So if we remove a third of our food production because of this threat, it's a huge loss. And that obviously is not the best situation when we need more farmland to feed a couple billion more people over the next century.
Historically, this river delta was all salt marshes, but more than 70% has been destroyed for modern agriculture. Harnessing the power of naturally salt-tolerant plants, Nara Climate is restoring marshland ecosystems in salt-affected regions around the world. Just downriver is the first of 3 salt marsh sites that they're working on here in Spain.
Yeah, it's a huge site. It's over 1,000 hectares and all the way to the horizon. Over here, it's a natural salt marsh, so this is what we're trying to mimic and replicate. So we're actively turning farmland, or what used to be agricultural land, but before that was a salt marsh, back into a salt marsh, but with an agricultural twist, right? So we're actively farming these ecosystems. And one of the main reasons why we do this combined, this integrated approach, is to really incentivize the restoration of landscapes. You know, of course, the economic value of agriculture is quite high as well. So it just makes sense to harmonize those together, right? That conservation and agriculture in one activity.
The former agricultural land is re-flooded using the same infrastructure that was originally built to drain it. On the edge of the river, a remaining natural salt marsh shows how important the ecosystem is for biodiversity.
And how salt marshes beneficial for bird life? It's amazing to see all these flamingos.
Yeah, it's an active biodiversity park in many ways. Between the birds, the insects, even mammals, it's huge. It's 550 species that live in these wetlands here just in this immediate area.
As well as Kenya and Namibia, Nara Climate is also restoring salt marshes in the US and UK, Ghana, Bangladesh, Pakistan and Australia.
So this site, I would say, is a type of blueprint, I think, for a lot of coastal climate challenges.
Nearly half of the world's estuaries have been altered by humans, and 20% of this loss has occurred in the past 35 years, making salt marsh conservation and restoration projects like these even more crucial.
Generally, we are, as a society and governments, starting to realize the importance of wetlands and starting to allow water to return to these drained marshes. They are the lungs of our planet in many ways, so protecting them and restoring them is just pretty important.
Yannick Nyberg, the founder of Nara Climate, ending that report by Amelia Hemphill.
Our headlines again. China and Kazakhstan agree to strengthen their relationship as President Xi Jinping is welcomed in Astana before a major summit.
Other headlines: United States jobless claims rise and fewer new openings than expected last month.
And last-minute campaigning by political parties in the UK before Thursday's general election.
And that's it for Global Business Europe. Thank you for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team here in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.